This tutorial is to demonstrate two ways you can correct blotchy skin, fine lines and wrinkles in Premiere without using any third-party plugins or masks or tracking. The first method uses just the Lumetri plugin to isolate a problem, and the second method uses what's known as the Orton effect. It's a photography trick that's typically used in landscape photography to make a landscape look somewhat dreamy. So here I've got a short piece of video of a girl studying. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Surely a 50-year-old smoker who likes the outdoors would be a better example for this demo, but I'm not crazy enough to ask any talent I've filmed whether or not they want to feature in a before and after video for problem skin. So this video is free for use under Creative Commons, and it's a close-up and she's not wearing makeup, so you should be able to see a difference. Now, if you look closely, you should notice some uneven skin tone on the nose and cheek, and these are the areas I'm hoping to smooth out. So let me just start off by opening the Lumetri Color plugin. The only section we're going to play around with is the HSL secondary, so you can ignore the other sections. HSL secondary has the ability to isolate a key color and then apply some correction to it. And it can be a bit fiddly to set up, so I'll try to keep it simple. When you first open this section, you'll see it's broken up into three parts: key, refine, and correction. Here's how you set the key color. So first use the eyedropper to select the problem color. Now there's no need to be too precise because this is just a quick way to preload the hue, saturation and lightness sliders below. Now you can't see what area you're affecting without checking the color gray box. Now everything that's grayed out will not be affected by our changes. So our aim is to gray out everything but the cheek, nose and chin as best we can. Unavoidably, anything else that's the same color will also be affected, like some bits of the background and her arm, but what we're doing will be pretty subtle, so any unintended effects should be minimal, and of course you could always use a mask to limit the area affected by Lumetri. Now, as you can see, the eyedropper hasn't done a stellar job, so the first thing to do is turn off the luminosity and saturation sliders so you can see just what the hue slider is grabbing. I'm going to narrow down the range of affected color and also the roll off to exclude as much as I can. Now that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to do the same for the saturation and luminosity sliders. Now of course you don't need to use all three sliders, and in this case I don't think the saturation is doing very much, so you can tell by how wide the range is that it's affecting almost everything, so we could probably leave it turned off. Whereas the luminosity slider is a bit more effective and is definitely helping to narrow down the area we wish to affect. Now we can move on to the refine section. Denoise doesn't do much in my experience, and the more important one would be blur. Now blur will soften the area that's being affected, but you have to be careful not to use too much blur because we don't want the corrected area to bleed into areas like the nostrils, lips or the glasses she's wearing. I don't think I've ever gone above 3 on the blur slider. So let's take a look at the whole picture again by unchecking the grey. Now I can tweak the options in the correction area. Turning the sharpness right down helps to blur the colours out a bit. So does turning down the saturation and using the colour wheel and temperature settings to fill the colour back in. It's best that you take some time playing with these to get the results you want. So if I just jump to this section here, there's one I prepared earlier, and you can see that when I turn the effect on and off, you can see the difference that it's made to the clip. It's a subtle improvement, and you would do far better with good makeup and lighting, but I find that it works great when you just need to knock down, say, a shiny nose that was missed while you were shooting, or maybe liven up a face that's been in front of a camera for 6 hours and maybe looking a bit tired. Now, my second method will easily knock 10 years off your talent, but it's pretty close to putting Vaseline on the lens, so you need to be careful when you use it because your footage might look a bit dreamy. The idea is to use 2 layers of the same clip. One layer, the bottom one, is blurred, and the other layer that sits on top is sharp with high contrast and the highlights and midtones bleached out. So when you combine the top layer with the bottom one by using opacity, the lines stay sharp, such as nostrils, eyelashes, hair, lips, but everything else is soft. So if we take a look at the bottom layer, you can see that I've applied a Gaussian blur. For this clip, I found 15 will give a nice subtle effect. In the past, I've gone as high as 30 for a music video, but the effect will be too strong for anything outside of a music video, dream sequence, or maybe a flashback. So typically between 10 and 20 would be the ideal amount of blur. Now, because I'm bleaching out the top layer, I've had to darken this bottom layer just a bit to compensate. So I just use curves in Lumetri to drop the exposure by maybe an f-stop or 2. So if we take a look at the top layer, the only effect used is one of the preset creative effects. It's called SL Bleach NDR, and it does what's on the packaging and bleaches out the mids and highs, but it leaves the dark shades dark. I've also added a whole lot of sharpening to it and a touch of saturation to get just a bit more color back into it. So when this layer is set to about 42% opacity, you can see the end result. It's really obvious when you compare it to the original. Now you notice that the skin is now very smooth, but the fine details are still very sharp, like the hair, the eyelashes, lips, and glasses. So that's it. I hope that this tutorial is useful to you, and thanks for watching.